Good morning everybody and welcome to another video. Now this week, as the title suggests, I want to give you a sort of introduction and my first impressions of this lens, the Sony 200-600 G lens. Now before I did that, actually I thought you deserved a little bit of an explanation, because over the past couple of months I've been really extolling the virtues of this camera, which is the Sony A6400, linked laterally to a Metabones Mark IV adapter and the Tamron 150-600 G2. So you're probably sitting there thinking, well, why have you switched lenses if that was so good? So as I say, I thought you deserved a bit of an explanation, so that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to split this video into two really. The first part I'm going to explain why I've made the change, and the second part I'm going to give you my initial impressions of this lens. I will follow that up probably in about 6 months time when I've done more shooting with it, with a fuller review of the lens as I see it as a wildlife photographer's lens anyway. So anyway, let's get on with it, and I'll explain why I've made a change. Right, so why have I made the switch to this lens if the previous configuration that I'd got was so good? Well, it's actually nothing to do with the performance of the Tamron lens and the Metabones adapter linked to this camera. I was more than happy with the performance I was getting in some of the shots that I was taking, and hopefully you've seen over the weeks that, you know, it produced some fantastic images. The problem was caused, and I mean a problem in a good way, actually, by the Sony A6400. If I take you back in time a little bit, I was shooting my wildlife with a Canon 80D and the Tamron 150-600 G2 with no adapter, obviously, because it's a Canon mount lens, the one that I'd got, and I was very happy with it. But I'd got the Sony A6400 as more of a lightweight sort of setup for my landscape photography, but I wanted this camera to be able to back up the Canon 80D, if you like, if need be. So occasionally I needed it for wildlife, I wanted it to be able to do that. The problem was caused by, once I got the Tamron onto the A6400 and I got that adapter sorted with the Metabones, which made it work brilliantly. If you want to look at my previous videos, I'll put those up there, you can see. But the problem is I started to use it on this A6400, and the performance on the A6400 was so good that I found myself not using the Canon. Once I got used to the balance issue, obviously a lot of people say, oh, it's such a small camera and the balance with such a big lens. It's really like anything, once you get used to it, it doesn't particularly become a problem. So I got used to it, and then I started to see the advantages of the A6400 over the Canon 80D. You know, it shoots 11 frames a second rather than the 7 that the 80D does, so you've got an advantage there. Not a deal breaker, but you know, it's there. And as well as that, it shoots at 120 frames a second, so you can get some nice slow motion images. And again, what I've found myself doing recently is a lot more filming of wildlife, not only for these videos that I put out, but also for, you know, stock libraries and things like that. And to be able to do it at slow motion really adds another dimension, so that was something else. And it also, one of the big things for me, and I mentioned this in my previous videos, and again this probably doesn't apply to a lot of people, which is why I always say when you're choosing a lens and camera setup, you really have to take everybody's opinions, you know, on board, but it's for you. So if your requirements are different, there's no point buying a setup that somebody else says is brilliant if it's not something that, you know, you're going to find useful. And for me, because I wear glasses for reading, one of the things that I was having trouble with the Canon was, again, with doing filming with the Canon, I always take images 99.9% of the time by using the viewfinder. I never use the screen on the back, very rarely anyway. But if I wanted to suddenly switch to video, I had to press a button, and then the only way to do it is use the live view on the screen on the back, the LCD. Now, with me wearing glasses for close-up work, as soon as I did that, I could not really see clearly on the screen if I was fully in focus, you know, whether I was tracking the animal properly. And I was finding myself having to slide back in a hide or whatever to try and get my eyes in focus. Now, other than that, you could say, yeah, you could wear your glasses, but you know, when you're out in the wilds and you're, you know, probably poor weather, having to put glasses on and off and make sure that they're not steamed up, it's just not something that you can particularly do well. It's just so difficult to manage that along with everything else while you're trying to take pictures and video. Now, with the Sony A6400, you basically just press the record button and you're immediately into filming, and you can do it through the viewfinder, so there's no issue with, you know, it being in focus. I just set the viewfinder so it's in focus for my eyes, and then basically that's it, away I go. Right, so probably the last couple of reasons are what I would say, the Canon has something called silent shutter, but because it's a DSLR and has a mirror in there, and you know, a mechanical shutter, the shutter is never particularly quiet. It's slightly quieter than if it's not in silent shutter, but if you use the A6400, when you put this in silent shutter, it is completely silent. There is no noise at all. You can't even tell if you're taking images, to be fair, and that does take quite a bit of getting used to. You tend to take a lot of images when you think you're not taking images, but it's completely silent, and obviously for wildlife photography that's a massive, can be a massive benefit, because, you know, silent shutter means silent, so the animal still won't know you're there, won't be alerted to your presence, and you can, you know, take shots. What would often happen with something like the 80D is you'd get a couple of shots and then the animal would be suddenly alert, and sometimes that's quite nice actually, to have that image where there's that alertness in the pose, but often that would be the last shot you got before the animal was away. So to have that silent shutter is a real benefit. And also the Sony's focusing system has something on the A6400 called animal eye detect, which is similar to the human eye detect, where it'll find a person's eye and then it'll focus on that eye. You know, if you're photographing a fox or a roe deer and it's walking towards you, the A6400 will lock focus onto the eye of that animal. So it's really accurate focus. So they were the reasons really, and what I found happening is once I got used to the balance of the camera, the Canon 80D wasn't getting used, and because in my mind I'd had in my mind for a number of years, even though I've had an association with Canon for 20 years virtually, with one small break for Nikon, I really felt this was the time to just switch completely to Sony. Once I'd made that decision, obviously what then happens is I'm using a adapted lens on the Sony. When is there any reason to do that? And I have to say, being fair, you will always get at least a slight improvement in autofocus, if not a big improvement, when you switch to a native lens on a native camera, simply because, you know, it's made for that camera, so it should work brilliantly. There's definitely a problem if it doesn't. So I made the decision to switch, get rid of the Canon, and basically put those funds into this lens. So that's what I've done. But anyway, I've come this way and not taken many photos with this so far. Ones I have taken I'll shoot up, nothing really spectacular. I actually shot a roe deer this morning. As I was walking to this wood, I saw the telltale footprints along the path I was walking on, and I know we had a lot of heavy rain last night and they looked fresh, they looked after that rain, so I just scanned the edge of the woodland and took this shot that you're seeing now. So just a grab shot, nothing spectacular. I was still quite a way away. There's a gap in the hedge just after that, and I knew I wouldn't be able to get across that gap without the deer seeing me, so I took a shot before I got there, and sure enough, when I tried to get past the gap, it was away. So yeah, reasonable shot from a distance. My initial impressions with this lens, as I say, incredibly sharp. One of the things I do like about it, and it's particularly important for things like filming, is that, as you can see, I've got this all set up to sit on a tripod. The zoom from 200 to 600 is internal, so this doesn't change size like the Tamron did. So if I get this balanced up on my tripod for filming or whatever, so that, you know, I can move it with the slightest touch and I can follow an animal, if I change then to 600mm from 200, there's no change in the balance of the lens and camera, so I'm not having to quickly unhook it and slide it further back to try and get that balance back. It's just balanced and it stays balanced, which is absolutely brilliant. And as well for hand holding, you know, as I said to you, because this is a small camera, it's like anything, when you get used to it. And what I generally do with this is, when I'm shooting handheld, I move the tripod foot up to the top so it's out my way, and I'm shooting like this. Once it's balanced, you've not got to move your hand. Yeah, it's absolutely fine to shoot. There's no change of balance when you zoom in or out, so once your hand gets used to it, and it's a little bit like muscle memory, once you get used to that, it just goes directly to it. So it's really good that there's no external zooming involved and no change of the ergonomics of the lens, if you like. The other thing I like about it is actually these buttons on the lens. So if you see there, you've got 3 of them, I think. Is there 3? 1, 2, 3. Yep. Now that means that you can, with Sony cameras, what you can do, and probably most manufacturers these days, you can set up your buttons on your camera to do virtually anything you want it to do. So what I've done with this, I've set these buttons to toggle between autofocus and manual focus, which is absolutely brilliant, because what that means is if I hit that, so say I'm trying to take a picture of a bird in some trees and there's branches across in front of the bird, but I've got a clear shot through. If I'm in autofocus, what will often happen, however good the focus is on these, is that the camera and lens will focus on the branches in front. It's just not a small enough point to get through to the bird. So what I will do is I'll focus as close as I can with the autofocus, hit that button there, and then if you look, the focus ring is directly behind the button. So while I'm like this, I can basically hit that and then gradually get the focus, tiny little adjustments, onto the bird rather than the branches, and away you go. That is absolutely fantastically useful, and I've found myself using that a lot recently because I've been doing a lot of garden bird photography with us being in lockdown, etc. So and you know, just wandering around taking pictures of birds close to home. Absolutely fantastic, and something that, yeah, once you use it, then you know, it's one of those things that you don't really want to be without, I suppose. Now, the other thing is people are interested in is things like build quality. This is a premium lens. I think the build quality is absolutely fantastic. I know it's got loads of weather seals in here as well, which also helps. So, you know, if you're going out in inclement weather, you're not going to have to really worry about ruining your lens. It's got a load of seals in here, so it should be fine. And as I say, the build quality is absolutely brilliant. I was talking about the zoom ring. This is incredibly smooth, so easy to turn, you can do it with one finger, and it basically goes from 200mm to 600mm in about a quarter of a turn, so it's really easy, and I do like that, but it does cause me a problem with something else which I'll come on to later. But as I say, and the focus is even smoother. It's absolutely smooth, that is, so really easy to do those minor adjustments when you drop it into manual focus. So I think that so far is what I would say about this lens. As I say, it's not a full review. It's got an autofocus, manual focus button. You can change the focus from full to 2.4 meters to 10 meters, which 2.4 is the minimum focus distance, which is probably a little bit on the long side, but you know, I do a lot of it's very rare that I get wildlife closer than 3 or 4 meters away from me. And then 10 meters to infinity, and again that would speed up the autofocus even more. Image stabilization on and off switch, and then 3 modes, 1 which is the normal, 2 which is for panning, and 3 which is like a special mode that tries to, if you're doing something where the movement is erratic, it tries to sort out the vibration or the movement on that. It's not a mode that I've used. I generally keep it in 1 most of the time, unless I'm doing sort of bird in flight shots. So that is really, so far, the things that I've found on this lens that I like. The main ones are its pin sharp and its super fast autofocus. Right, yes, so niggles with this setup and this lens. The zoom ring, I absolutely love it, and the fact that it's so smooth, but the only problem is there's no lock. So if you remember from my review of the Tamron 15600 G2, it had basically got a lock switch that you could lock in certain positions, but it had also got a soft lock. So what you could do is you could turn that to say 400 and then pull that, and it would give like a soft lock, a sort of a drag on it, which meant that you couldn't change the zoom at all. Now what I've found is, and I'll just put a bit of video up hopefully to show that as I'm speaking, is that I've had this on a beanbag a couple of times, and when I'm rotating the camera, if I'm following something, what can happen is the friction of the beanbag will just turn this. So you'll suddenly find that you've either gained 200 or 300 millimeters or lost 200 or 300 millimeters in the zoom. I did read somewhere that what they've done is, because they've, and what I'll probably do with this eventually is get a neoprene cover for it just to protect it. But what they've done is the piece of neoprene that comes over this section here, is they've slipped it slightly down so that it rests on the zoom ring, literally to make it slightly tighter and provide a little bit of drag. So you can still turn it, but it's enough drag that when it's resting on something, the drag is enough to stop the zoom turning. It would have been nice to have that lock on there. Obviously it's not a deal breaker, because you can just keep your eye on it when you know that that's liable to happen, but it's just one of those things that you need to be aware of. And probably the only other thing I've found at the minute, and something that I would have liked actually, again not a deal breaker, but the Tamron, and I think I mentioned this in my review of it, compared to the Sigma 15600 Sport and something else, but compared to the Sigma anyway, which was the 2 lenses, the Tamron 15600 G2 and the Sigma 15600 Sport, at the time they were the 2 lenses that I was deciding which to get, and I made the decision to get the Tamron one because of the weight difference. Sigma is a really heavy lens, but the other was that at 400 millimeters on the Tamron you were still at f5.6, which in low light situations just gave me that extra little bit of light and a lot of length on the lens still to do some useful wildlife photography. Don't forget this is on a crop sensor, so you're getting that crop factor anyway that pulls you in closer. The Sony here, basically up to just over 300 it's 5.6, and then it leaps to 6.3, so you're losing that light a lot earlier, like 100 millimeters earlier than you do on the Tamron. Now it would have been nice if that could have crept up to 400, but probably that may have taken the price up a little bit more. Lovely buzzard. So yeah, that would have been nice if it went to closer to 400, would have been really nice, but as I say, it's not a deal breaker. I find that, you know, you can just play around with the ISO a little bit more, because the ISO on cameras is so good these days, the way the cameras handle it, that you know, you can always do that. So they're just the 2 points really that I've found so far. I'm liable to find some more over the next few months, and I will report those back to you. hopefully you'll see that the images that I'm taking will sort of validate my decision. Right, so that's it. So far I'm very happy with this lens. As I say, I've not used it for much wildlife photography at the minute, but hopefully that'll change as we come out of lockdown, and you know, we'll be able to do some really spectacular work with it. That's what I'm hoping anyway. Now obviously one of the things that's left me with is I'm now down to a single camera, and to be honest I have to address that, because with doing sort of workshops and one-to-ones, it's really imperative that I have a backup to this camera, just in case something goes wrong with it while I'm out on a workshop or a one-to-one. So I don't know, what do people think that I should do? I mean, the decisions that as I see it, is I'm really happy with the performance of this camera, and it does everything that I need it to do. Part of me thinks, should I save up and put some money into something like a second-hand A9, which is probably going to cost me just over £2,000, and then I'm thinking, do I really need it? This is performing so well. I think the A7r3 would be an option as well. I think that might be slightly cheaper, but again, what advantages is it giving me? The other part of me thinks, well, why not get another A6400 or even an A6300? So yeah, they're the options that I've got, and I will be making a decision fairly shortly on that. At the minute I'm actually swaying towards an A6300 as a backup, because it's not going to get used very much. It'll do a little bit of video work for my YouTube videos, and as I say, act as a backup. It still shoots at 11 frames a second. I don't think it's got the flip over screen, which I'm not really that bothered about. So yeah, they're the options. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little insight into camera decisions and lens decisions. As I always say in these things, you know, what you've got to do is make sure that the decision that you make is right for you. Not only the types of photography that you're doing, but also your budget and things like that. I was more than happy with the Tamron 150-600 G2. It's just, I was looking at the amount of kit I've got lying around, and when you're running two systems, and also, as you'll be aware, and if you want to see my beginners series, I'll put a link up here. Doing the beginners series, I've now got a Nikon and a Tamron 7300 lens, which I'm using for that series, so I'll have that for a while I'm doing that. And yeah, it was just getting quite a lot of kit hanging around, and it's a decision that I've been thinking about for a long time. Really, the cost of the 100-400 Sony lens, and the fact that, I don't know, 400 is good, but it always seems a little bit short to me. I like a little bit more zoom if I can. And when this lens came out, and I have to be honest, in my opinion, this lens is very expensive, don't get me wrong, it's very expensive, but if you look at Sony's lineup of lenses, this one seems to be the odd one out. To be honest, I would not have been surprised if this lens was retailing at £2,500. Would not surprise me at all. And I think Sony will probably find that they sell an awful lot of these. Probably be one of their best selling lenses. I mean, it's heavy, you know, that may put some people off, but for me it's absolutely ideal. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I don't think you want to listen to me rabbiting on any longer. I'll see you next week for another video, and if you've liked this video, please give it a like, it really does help. And for those people who haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please consider subscribing, and I will see you next week for another one. Cheers, bye.